how we boosted cross-department performance by over 40% in a system handling 16,000 tasks a month together with 1,000 people. Most people think system building means stacking tools and automations, but that's exactly why their productivity and their team's productivity keeps stalling. After 8 years building systems in corporate and coaching thousands of professionals over the years, I've learned that real systems aren't tool dependent. They are built on clarity, constraints, and repeatable workflows that get everyone on the same page. In this video, I'll show you the simplest way to design a high-impact process map, and then walk you through 2 real-world examples that prove how scalable this is. First, I'll show you how I went from solopreneur to team inside the paperless movement using exact this process. And second, you will also see how this personally helped me as a professional eliminate 100% of the extra work I was expected to take on, and how it transformed my team from burnout to motivated. So make sure you watch until the end to see exactly how it worked and how it can help you to achieve exactly the same. It's important to start with a simple example first. So in order to get started, I downloaded here the ICOR workflows template. It's part of the Automation Like a Pro course inside the membership. However, I will put a link in the description below where you can download this for yourself. This might look confusing, okay? Because this is already the end result that you see here as an example. And you will see when we dive into this now, it will be a lot easier. So that's where we differentiate between simplified work streams and workflow responsibilities. The simplified work stream, that's the most important thing. And that's something that many are struggling with. We have inner circle members where we go through this step by step together with them, and we say, can you provide an example workflow? And they struggle to come up with something that they are doing on a daily basis inside the business. They are not really realizing all the work they're doing daily. But once they realize something that they're doing on a daily basis and they laid out this simple workflow, everything clicks. And they start doing this for so many other places inside business to improve work performance. So it's all about optimization rather than automating. And you will see what this means in a moment. So let's start with something simple. And therefore I use client sales call as a simple workflow. And here you see we have this button, go to workstream SOP. So if you have a SOP for this already, what it allows you inside Miro is that you can actually right click on here and you can say link to, and here you can paste a link to a ClickUp doc or Google doc or any other place on SharePoint. Maybe you have the documentation where you can directly link to this out, because this will become the overview of the workflow that you're doing. And with one click of a button, you get the details behind all the steps that you're doing. But now let's get started, okay? Client sales course. And again, I keep it very simple. So what is the start? You might say the start is client books call. However, I say the start is offer free call. That's the starting point. And then the next step is client books call. Then during call, take notes. Again, as I say, it's very simple. And obviously you will have more things to do there. Then follow up after call. And then we can actually differentiate between 2 outcomes here, say closed or say lost. To realize the basics, and by already having just this simple starting point, I have a different view on the whole process already. Because now I can go through this and say, okay, client books call. Is there actually something I do between this? Am I preparing something for the call? Now I can just simply say call preparation. And now I realize, well, this needs time. I can plan this out. The thing is, during the week, you might have several calls. So you realize these individual blocks take time. So maybe the call is usually 15 minutes. Call preparation takes you 30 minutes. During the call, 15 minutes. Follow up after call takes you another 30 minutes to go through your notes. And then you wait. What happens if the client doesn't respond? Now you could add this too. I could do this too. Client doesn't respond. And you can have a loop and say, I follow up again. How many times? 2 times. You can then visualize this in a way that it makes most sense for you. And I don't want to overcomplicate this right now, because I just want to keep these things as simple as possible to go through the whole process mapping, okay? So now that we have these basics of the call, I can go to the next thing, workflow responsibilities. I just duplicate this and bring it into this section here. And let's say that this, say me, right? And this makes you realize also, you know, if you want to have it fancy in the end, you can keep this on top, but this might be also enough. Now you realize doing this placing here, this is all you doing. And that's where we can have these swim lines to realize what we can actually automate and what we can delegate. What this is already telling you, it shows you an average time that it needs. And when you copy this over and you just see this isolated, just this one workflow, this shows you that if it's only you doing this and you want to scale this, there's a lot more than just filling up these 15-minute calls during the week. There's a preparation and all these things. And when you now say you want to have 5 calls per week, you saw already, man, this is actually a lot of things going on. But 5 calls a week is not so much. Maybe I want to have even more. Just visually shows you how complicated your work becomes if you just want to have 10 calls per week. The individual steps like these 30 minutes makes you realize, oh man, there's actually a lot of hours that coming together. I mean, just the follow-up would be 5 hours per week, just follow-ups. Another 5 hours of preparation, 10 hours there. And then the call themselves and so on. Okay, so this is where people hit the ceiling. They do something because they do it on intuition. Maybe they even thought this process through. But the problem is when they hit the ceiling, when they want to scale the business or the process. And by doing this, you are aware of these limitations and then you can act on this. And the thing is, people always want to make everything automated or nothing. And that is nonsense, because by having this overview now, you perfectly realize individual process steps that you might be able to automate or delegate. For example, client books call. How do you do this? Do you actually reach out via email? You follow up, you give them your availability. There's a back and forth. Hey, when can we do this? This is something you can perfectly automate. I'm using Calendly in our business that I can decide when people can book calls. So I have perfectly organized my week when these calls will happen. And then, the client books a call. You could then say that when they book this call, I can have a form the client has to fill out, keep it as simple as possible. But the client can provide some key information that helps you to prepare much more efficient for the meeting. And therefore, having a survey, it's much easier. And by having this structured information, now you could think about that actually as a different person could prepare this meeting for you. But maybe you as the authority want to show up in the meeting. But you see the thought process behind this. Now we removed already 30 minutes from the whole process. This is already automated. I mean, this could be hours if you have a lot of back and forth with the client. And then the follow-up after the call. If you recorded the meeting, you might have the transcription. You can use AI to summarize everything and then have a template that actually allows you to easily write a follow-up email. Or again, you could delegate this. And the client doesn't respond, then you also could just add another process step that tells you to auto follow up. Maybe there could be a setup in your emails to automatically follow up, and then either the sale is closed or the sale is lost. So you can go complex, but the thing is, you need to be able to make informed decisions, whatever you add to this process, how much time it will take, and how you can actually automate or delegate the work. By just simply having this overview, you can have now perfectly a person coming in and you know what this person needs to do. And now the thing is, each individual step could be an SOP. And as I showed you in the beginning, you can link out to these SOPs by simply right-clicking and link to and provide a link to the SOP. So for the assistant and for actually the whole team that you're building, this is just the single source of truth they need to go to, or you take a screenshot and add this on top of your SOP. So everybody is on the same page. Where are the responsibilities? Where are the handovers when another person has to do the next steps? And the next step is optional because you can have this also in the SOP. You can add this here. But here we have another swim lane where we can apply the tools. You can add the logos of the tool for better visualization, but I keep it simple. That's the email, right? Call preparation done in ClickUp, because once you have this work stream, it's easy to go into any project management tool. It could be Asana, it could be Monday.com, doesn't matter. I'm just placing here ClickUp, but the principle is always the same. Once you have this overview, go to the project management tool and replicate this tool agnostic workflow inside your tool, because now everything is flowing on common sense. And I can show you this in another video you how we do this inside ClickUp. So let me know in the comments below if you want to see this. And then during the call, what is it that you're using during the call, right? Using Zoom maybe. And then the follow-up after call is email again. So you can just move this up, and then client doesn't respond. See, still in email. You might have an autoresponder that the email allows you to use. So for example, Superhuman has something like this, or you use an external AI tool or Zapier that leverages an AI in order to follow up via email. So this is not 100% laid out as we would do this with our clients inside the inner circle, for example, where we go into a lot more detail. But I hope that you got the point behind how we approach process mapping. First, think about in the most simplistic way possible. Then start to think about the responsibilities. Who is doing what in the process. And for me, for example, when I built a team at the Paperless movement, we had a long workflow when it came to doing interviews on YouTube. Well, I can show you. Here's a real use case. Back in the time when I had employees in the Paperless movement helping me with the interview workflow, right? I had the simplified work stream. I had here create community event post to interview, and you see it's all linking out to the individual SOPs with a click of a button. I was already aware of all the individual steps that I need to do to have an interview. And you see, there's a lot more involved than simply having an interview, because there was then also upload and schedule the blog post, create social media posts, create blog posts. And I was doing all this on my own in the beginning of the Paperless movement. And then I hired people, and I made this differently. I actually said, out of all the simplified work stream, all I want to do is I want to do this interview and nothing else. Everything else should be either automated or delegated. And it was my goal. So first I realized all the things that were on my plate that were holding me back doing other things like client work or video creation, and the things that I have still to do, as I was the one interviewing my guests and it was the CEOs from different tool companies. So it needed to be me doing the interviews. So I just placed this, and then I thought about the other processes. I had 2 employees at this time, and here's the delegation. I said, interviewee booked an event. That was the automation that triggered a task inside ClickUp. And then therefore, Alessandro in this case knew what to do next, create a community event post, and that was scheduled out. And then I do the interview. And after the interview, he started doing the editing instead of me, as it was simplified using Descript, a specific video editing tool that's much easier to use. And then create social media snippets out of it. Then create blog posts. So she was the writer. She used then the transcript from the recording, created a blog post, created social media posts. He uploaded then the blog post to the website, uploaded a social media post, and then I just had a final approval where everything was prepared, and I just checked quickly if things are okay. And after they are okay, everything got scheduled and everything got automatically published. And here was the tool stack used for this workstream. Interviewee, there was an automation back then using make.com that creates the event post in Circle. Now we are on Mighty Networks. So a lot has changed. We've used StreamYard, not Zoom, for the recordings, right? So that's the place where I had to go to. Descript was used for the editing, and then they create a blog post inside ClickUp and all these things. And then it was automatically published on WordPress. You know, that's another example where we had the ICOR guide back then, and people were able to sign up. Now I can lay out exactly what's happening after a person sign up and how these things work out. And now let's go to the example from corporate that is on a much bigger scale and had a much bigger impact too. All right, here we are. This is the original map back from, I created this February 29th, 2020. There was still more than a year left before I then left and went all in the Paperless movement. And I was in my, what was it then, the 7th year in corporate, and I climbed the ladder. So what you just need to know is a bit of a backstory. I was an employee and was part of a team in this big company, 300,000 employees. You know, I was nobody in there and still was able then to climb the ladder. First, being the employee in the team, improving our own team performance by 60%, streamlining processes and implementing single source of truth. If you're interested to learn more about this, there's a video about it where I share the whole story behind this. But then later on, I was able to take over a team in a complete different department. I went to IT in this corporate and I took over a team of 5 people who were completely overworked. So one guy was coming back from burnout. I first had to understand what they had on their plate. Why are they overworked? So in order to do this, I started using Asana, a project management tool that we were allowed to use back then. And I could have used any tool. I could have even used Excel, but I wanted to have a proper project management tool in order to start using it as if I would work with my team inside this tool already. But it was just me. So what I did, I collected all the projects they were working on, and they didn't even realize where they're involved because they were global projects and a lot of going on. I ended up realizing that my 5 people were working on over 150 projects globally. In parallel, just 5 people. So they were scattered over all these projects. That was the first thing. And then there was another person from a different group in the IT department I was working in who switched positions inside the company after 15 years working in this position that he was in. So they came to me and said, hey, you could just take over his job too. And I said, I'm not sure. I'm just becoming here the team leader of these 5 people. And my boss already said, yeah, you could become another expert and do the job what the rest of the team is doing. After realizing this with the 150 projects, I already proposed that I rather manage the team instead of being another team member working inside a team, because I can achieve a lot more managing the team and saving us not only time but also money, instead of becoming another expert who starts to struggle together with the team on all these things. So that's something that I already were able to do. But then this thing came in and said, you can take over the work what this guy was doing. I went to one of the project meetings that this guy was involved in, and it was all about medicine packaging lines. All right. They were building packaging lines from scratch. So there's a lot going on. There are long-term projects, and I had no idea about what this guy was doing and what I'm supposed to do. I went to this meeting, and what they said was, well, that's what you will do, and this is what you will do. And then they showed a slide deck and said, well, that's what you're doing, because this guy was doing it. And I said, I don't think I will do any of this, because all the things that you just showed, it's not the responsibility of my team. So I said, please give me a moment. Obviously, when it came to the skills, I wasn't the person for doing this, because what we realized is that the person who left after 15 years just took on more and more work that actually was supposed others to do, but he wanted to speed things up. So he taught it himself and he took over all these things, and people got used to that this guy will do it. And now an individual person became a bottleneck. And now he left, and now they had the issues. And that's why I said, if I try to make this, I will become the next bottleneck. So in my opinion, what we should see there is not my name, but there should be a person's function that should be clear who is doing what. And this led me to making this map. So obviously I didn't know anything about this project. What I grasped during this first meeting, I tried to lay out very simply, but then I contacted all the other people involved, and we're sitting in a meeting, including engineering, quality assurance, all these other people, different departments, and thought about the map. How do you actually build this project? And the first thing that we realized is that every project was started from scratch. Always were thought like that was never done before, but there were many built during a year in parallel. There are many components inside projects that are recurring. And by identifying these, you can actually create a work stream, even if it is a project with a start and an end date. So that's what we see here. And it took about 2 months to really get everything laid out and understand the full process of the project. And that's the thing. Nobody else was doing this before. There was a lot of lessons learned after completing the project and things like that, but nobody thought about making a map out of it. And so I was the first using Miro back then, and it was rolled out afterwards throughout the whole company. Everybody was using Miro, but that was the starting point. And this is the original map. So the person who left after 15 years was responsible for most of what was included here, and for most what was included here, and then even this part here. This is what this person was responsible for, and that I should take over as somebody who had no clue about what he needed to do, the expertise and all this thing was missing. So, but after the exercise, going through this together with the different departments, we not only realized that the responsibility is in complete different departments, but also that they would be much more efficient as they have access to certain systems that this person was asking for to get access to. And that's where we ended up after 15 years doing it this way. Not me, but my team ended up only with this section here to do. This simple step here was all my team now had to do after I was able to delegate the work to the departments who are much more efficient in order to completing the work. And while there's a lot more in the background about budgeting and things like that, obviously, and a lot of politics as well. But the thing is, we achieved it. And this increased the cross-department performance with over 40%. But you can imagine yourself what this meant when the different departments were now doing what they do best. And the thing is that we now were able to just focus on this part. This became our work stream, what I just showed you previously. Now we really focused on providing this one hardware they needed as fast as possible, because initially we ended up having all this work as my team. But then we realized even within our department, we have different groups who are much more efficient doing the other steps. And that's where it became crystal clear why we do this, because we are most efficient there, and why the other groups are doing this. And this, as I mentioned Asana previously, this is where I brought in my team to create these work streams and work on them. Then we brought in the rest of the different groups because it made all the sense to have the full picture of the work stream. This means the moment the request came in here, we knew already within a week we need to work on this, and therefore the planning became much more efficient. And then eventually we brought everybody else from the different departments into Asana too. So we had this whole thing, the project, going in a one single source of truth. The communication happened directly on the project and everything was in one place. And that was just for this project work. And later on, we rolled this out for more than 1,000 people. We had over 16,000 tasks per month that we handled inside Asana. And that's where we kept improving project work, but always also the cross-department work together, the handovers, and two things stopped. Finger pointing, because now it was crystal clear that this map, even for the project manager, if something stopped, the project manager immediately knew who to contact, who to reach out to. That's something you cannot quickly get out of a smart sheet or Excel sheet or something like that, or a Gantt chart, right? Here, that's the map also for responsibilities. And the second thing is that anxiety dropped, because now it was crystal clear. Communication was in one place. If there were some issues with this, we just had the task there for creating this hardware. And all we had to do is mentioning another person inside the task discussion and discussing what's going on. And therefore, everybody was always on top of everything. And this led to a significant drop of meetings. I had 50% less meetings than I had before. And now when you think about that, the starting point was taking over the work of all this, and now my team was doing this. For me, the workload dropped by 100%. That was actually meant for me to do, to something that my team was also compensating a lot in the past, and now they were able to focus on. And this led them to take over another team that were the leadership team, where we rolled out a single source of truth to make this even large scale inside the company. And it was the last thing I was working on before I then left the company and went all in paperless movement. Earlier, I mentioned how I was able to boost team performance by 60%, not as a manager, but as a team member. If you want to see exactly how I achieved that in just 3 months, check out this next video where I break down the full strategy step by step. If you're aiming for similar results in your team or for yourself, trust me, you don't want to miss it.